Hi, I'm Chase Giacomo. I play the lead role of Christian Baker in the movie A Law for Christmas. This is a little glimpse into my life story. My story starts in a small town in Montana. My parents got divorced at a pretty early age. I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I often joke that my early childhood was kind of like the Cinderella story. I had an evil stepmom, and and it was not a lot of fun in those early years. Fortunately, I had an amazing mom who taught me a ton about going after your dreams, persevering, finding a way to make things work. And one easy example of that was growing up. She had this dream to build this little house on some land in Montana, and my sister and I and her, we didn't have a way to afford to be able to build the house and also pay rent. So we got a teepee, and we lived in the teepee for 7 months through a Montana winter with a stove in there, heated water out of like a nearby lake, did everything with an outhouse, and just made it work. And then she got her dream home when we were done with that process, and it just taught me a lot about finding a way. If this whole idea that if there's a will, there's a way. And so from there, I was had a pretty normal high school. I think like most people, I had an opportunity to have a soccer scholarship in Texas, but fortunately had the opportunity at the same time to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and that whole process was kind of a journey for me, being 17, 16 years old at the time, and having to get a U.S. Senator to nominate me to go to the Academy to represent Montana. And I didn't have parents that were donating to any of the senators' campaigns or anything like that, and so just going into that process was a special journey for me. During that time, I actually met my now wife when I was in junior high, and followed her to her church in high school, and that's when I came to my faith. Was during that time of actually first going after her at church, like I want to be where she is, and then finding the Lord in that process, and that was really kind of set my life in a different direction, which ultimately I ended up going to West Point and studied at West Point for 4 years. Got my bachelor's degree there, and then commissioned into the U.S. Army as a lieutenant. Right out of West Point, I went to a unit in Washington, was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, had my first kid with my wife, and then we deployed to Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, I was a platoon leader, so I was the first lieutenant at the time. I had a platoon around 30, 35 guys, and we just were there in a maneuver capacity. So we had kind of a big geographic area that we were responsible for, and we would just patrol to the different villages on a daily basis and try to talk about the district center and alternatives to farming, poppies. Instead, you could grow wheat and have a market, and just kind of trying to have an impact on the culture there. And we set up a women's health clinic. We tried to establish some schools in the outer districts of that area. Where we were stationed, we were in Kandahar, right between Helmand and Pakistan, and so a lot of the drug trade was going through the area. We were in the mountains, kind of outside of Kandahar city, but more remote, about 2 hours away, and had a base that just had 2 platoons and some Afghan army with us. So a lot of times when we were close to where we were operating out of, everything was fine, but once we got to the outer limits of it, that's when we were interacting and having, we're getting into combat on a regular basis there, with the drugs trying to go out of the country, and the drug lords coming in, and the Taliban, had funding incentives to be involved with that.
Been in contact the last 3 days. Just got shot at again today. Now we're sitting on the mountain waiting to get shot at as it gets dark. Right outside.
Was in Afghanistan in 2012. Ended up having some injuries from my time of service, and came back to the States and was working on rehabbing from those. There was a point where things were so bad, I'd messed up some parts of my spine, discs and facets and joints and different things that I think I had 3 or 4 years of physical therapy. There was probably a 6-month period where my wife was helping me put my shoes on, and I was retraining things. And so there was definitely some adversity there to overcome. And when I realized I wasn't going to be able to stay in the Army because I wasn't able to get back to where I had been physically, I attended law school at that point. And I did my first year at Notre Dame Law School, and it was just a tremendous experience. Great professors, great classmates, really enjoyed my time there. But I'd always felt this calling and dream to go to Harvard Law School. And so, living on a prayer, tried to go to Harvard and transfer after my first year. And I remember getting the call that I'd gotten into Harvard, and very rejoiceful, very thankful, celebrated with my family, and then obviously got to work, got to Harvard, was there for the rest of my law school time, graduated from Harvard, and practiced law in a trust and estates practice group, so drafting wills, trusts, powers of attorney. During this time, we had our fourth child, and we're going to adopt our fifth child, which we did. We love, awesome. We have 3 boys and 2 girls. But during that time of practicing law, I found it interesting. Certainly estate planning, you get to deal with families and the different dynamics, and there's tax implications, asset protection implications, liability problems, and then family dynamics that you have to overcome. And I found it enjoyable, but I just felt this calling to do something different. And I believe that media has such an impact on culture and society. And I know I've been deeply impacted by films and stories that I see, and been drawn to storytelling and reading and different stories and going on adventures. And so I guess there was a very unnatural but natural transition into acting classes and acting training. People laugh and say, like, man, you took a really long route to become an actor. But just like everything else, I was like, I got to become, if I want to be the best at this, I gotta work with the best. I gotta train. I gotta figure out how to develop my skills. And so I fortunately found a really established and famous actor named Kirk Waller. He plays Gaius on The Chosen, and he was doing some mentorship in the acting world, but not really coaching or teaching acting. And so I connected with him and just convinced him to let me be his first student, to do one-on-one and just take me through his acting approach and training in the Meisner technique, and now has kind of developed into the Waller technique. And so that was about 4 years ago, and I worked with him weekly for a few years, and I still do classes with his program, and he brings in guest speakers, and was just been training. And during that process, at some point, started actually doing projects, started with some short films, doing a little bit of background work, and then it's progressed into more commercials, and shot my first TV show this summer, and just different projects, other feature films that I've been a part of in that world. And so that leads me to where we are today. Super thankful to be a part of this story and the impact that I think it's going to have. And who doesn't love a Christmas movie and kind of a romantic comedy-esque film that I think has a really good message, and a message that I think families and people really enjoy during the Christmas season, and hopefully other times of the year as well.